It is showtime. Hello, hello, everybody. Hello, Mad World. Lynn, how you doing? Good morning for me over here. I have a hunch it's evening for some of you, and such excitement, such excitement. What could we be covering? All right, so happy Wednesday. Wednesdays at 10, Fridays at 10 Pacific time are my normal streaming times. So, welcome to my channel. You're on Booktube. I'm Margaret. I'm an author and a reader. And today I did a stream last Wednesday reminding people to get out and vote for the special election in America. And today it's going to be focused on favorite political books. And wouldn't you know it, for once, it's a happy political day. We've had a Democratic sweep in a lot of the special elections, a lot of 60-40 vote splits, and we will take it. I think that's a really good sign. And so really in a good mood this morning. So if you're on that wave and feeling good, subscribe to the channel. Cheers. Here's to people's voices being heard and hopefully more getting done in our election mechanisms. So I have a lot to discuss today. I have several piles of books over here, but also, adjust that. I'm going to do a few updates at the beginning and then upcoming events. So stay tuned. We'll get through it all eventually. Greg is also here. Hello, fellow readers. And Alan, evening greetings, as I expected, suspected. Eva is here. Hello, hello, my friend. Gareth is here. Oh, bugger. I wanted to watch this and something's come up. Be back soon. No worries. We'll be on for a while. There's a lot to get through. Julie is here. Hello, everyone. Looking forward to our discussion today. Happy Californian. Yes, Prop 50 was voted in. In case you're curious, around the world, Prop 50 was a ballot initiative asking the voters if we should redistrict the districts in California so that we had extra districts that would run Democratic based on people's voting patterns to combat the redistricting that was not democratically done in Texas. And so I guess we'll just cross our fingers to see that no other states do the same little shenanigans before the midterm elections, but we'll have to see. Yay, Leslie is here popping the champagne. Excellent, excellent. And says, pause my audiobook at my humdrum job for this. Woohoo! Oh, excellent. Yay. Yay, hellos, the blue wave. I love it. And hello, and goodbye. Hello, Ben. Good morning, everybody. Oh, Kiana, hello, hello. Kiana just had an amazing book haul, and I tuned in. She talked about an author that I'd read, and then that author popped up on a live stream that I normally watch, which is on Marcy's channel, Brown Girl Collective. So that was an amazing little turn. Was it only last night or 2 nights ago, perhaps? Cautiously Hopeful from Illinois. Yeah. I just listened to a interview with Kat. Ooh, she had a difficult last name. She's running for a district next year in Illinois, and she's like a media policy person. She's protesting in front of Broadview, and so I got a little bit of details about that. Sounds a lot like the ICE protest in Portland. Yay, proud Californian. Excellent. Yeah, we love our blue wave, and so we're allowed to be happy this morning. Okay. So the updates I have before I dive into my massive piles of books next to me, precariously balanced here. The first one is going to be the Read What You Own Challenge update. I watched Deb's video this morning. Oh, second cup of tea. Delicious. Deb's over at Rainer Reads, and she had done an adjustment from the way she did the Read What You Own challenge last year because of how it went for her. And I was like, that's really smart. So I think I'm going to follow her lead. The Read What You Own challenge is hosted by a few bigger booktubers, and it's basically to, as I asked in a previous question, if people liked to do, restrict books that you buy in order to read books that you own. I think those are sometimes both goals of some of us. And so pairing them, saying you can't buy a book until you read this many books, is sort of a challenge for yourself, but you have to know yourself and know your psyche to know what will work and what will not drive you crazy. So I think I'm going to go with what Debs is proposing, which is just read till the end of the year. But I'm going to go with 25, her goal, before the end of the year. I did look at my average and I read about 12 books a month, so it shouldn't be too much of a stretch. I'm going to be reading the ones that I have currently reading. I've got 12 books currently reading, and I think 11 are realistically going to be read before the end of the year. So that means I have, is it 11? It's 9, sorry. So 9 current reads that I will realistically finish, and a couple of those are library books, so they're not what I own. There's 4 other library books awaiting my attention. 107 Days, which I should really start. The Titanic Survivors Book Club, which looked fun. The Traveling Cat Chronicles, which is a cozy Japanese translation. And, oh, Devil Makes 3, right here. So 9 current reads, 4 other library books, and then I'll just pick 12 others. So 25 seems doable in 2 months before the end of the year. Yeah, so that will be my read what you own challenge, is that I'm going to finish the current reads, except for 1 or 3. I'm not sure how my math works out there. And finish the other library books before I leave town in a couple weeks. So that's actually, I got to get a move on. And then choose 12 other books. And I'm not going to choose them because that would just doom me to failure. So I'm excited. I think that will work. It's always a little dicey when you have to choose what you're going to read because you're moving or you're on a trip. So if you don't know, I sort of live in 2 places. I live here in Portland, Oregon on my own, and then I spend about 4 months of the year down in California with my parents in one of 2 places where I grew up or near my sister. And so yeah, I'm going to be going down there for the holidays and have to choose what to bring with me. So you never know if you're going to hit it right, but we'll see. So yeah, read what you own. That's exciting. The next update is, yeah, Deb's video was lovely. She had some fun little rabbit holes too. The next update was about buddy reads, right? Did I put that in there? Yes. Okay, so included in the current reads and in the projected 12 mystery ones is going to be buddy reads. The one that I'm currently reading is Walking with the Wind, which is John Lewis's memoir. It's a big chunky one. I'm reading it with Tiffany at TL Russ, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll have a live show discussion of it. It's a really well-written book. I'm really enjoying it, taking it in pieces. On Monday, Thanksgiving week, so Monday, November 24th, but I'm waiting for confirmation, and she has like one last thing to check. So that is something to look forward to. And then I just started yesterday a buddy read with my friend Rachel at RK Stumbling Bear, and we are reading I'm gonna make sure I don't stumble over the name. It's got legendary in it, and it's got fry bread in it. Here we go. So I'm listening to the audiobook, which has a whole bunch of different narrators. And I don't know if it has a whole bunch of different writers as well. I think they're all separately written stories. It's called Legendary Fry Bread Drive-In Intertribal Stories. And I'll just pop this up really quick so you can see the cool cover. All the writers here, Cynthia Lightich Smith is probably like the ringleader, the organizer. And then all these other writers, including some that I've read before, some you may have heard of, like Byron Graves, Angeline Boulley, who is the Firekeeper's Daughter author, Darcy Little Badger, who wrote Latsaway, just lots of great people. David Robertson, who is one of the nonfiction books I read a few months ago. He's great. So I've just listened to the first story, and Rachel and I are going to be trading thoughts about the stories as we go. Maybe a story a day. We'll see if we get to keep that pace, but that's exciting because it is Native American Heritage Month, and I know we have had some ups and downs with who's running the readathon in my career on Booktube. So for the past 5 years, we had Indigathon for 2 years, and then it was Skoden, like Let's Go Then, and then it was something else last year. But the people who have run it have just been like burnt out, I think, and so totally fine that we're not depending on them for recommendations. I'm going to have plenty of Indigenous authored and narrated recommendations for folks sometime. I will put those out sometime within the next week. That would be a good one. Or you can always just search Indigathon on my Storygraph or on my channel if you're curious to read some of these, because there's some really great Indigenous written books. Nonfiction and fiction, because it's also Nonfiction November, which doesn't exist anymore. So I'm living in the past with these 2 readathons, and I'm okay with that. All right. So those are the buddy reads. I may get a 3rd buddy read before the end of the year in December if Sonia from An Enthusiastic Reader gets in touch to pick back up with the Maisie Dobbs series, because I'm waiting on reading the final one and Standalone by Jacqueline Winspear, but she did not have time the last time I checked in. So we'll see if she can get it before the end of the year, but perhaps not. All right. Yeah, the drive-in. The first story was pretty disorienting for me, but I hope it's like set the stage for the other stories. And yeah, now that I'm locked in, as they say. So yeah, excited about that. Okay. All right. So top favorite political books. Now that we're in a good political mood, I have a couple caveats. The caveat 1, these are going to be US focused. I am an American. I have traveled around the world. I do have studied international relations. I have read international politics books. I've read Canadian. I've read European. I've even read a Turkish politics book one. That was hard to get through. But they didn't hit home as hard. And so they didn't become favorites because they didn't ring as true with me. So you can feature them in your own favorites lists if you want to do your own favorite political books for the season. But just, I realize, and I just wanted to acknowledge that up front, because America is not the world. I do realize that. The second one is, I think in politics, a lot of people would include biographies of big personalities, presidents, emperors, etc. And you know what? I really don't like biographies. I don't like I don't like hearing about one person's life being so much more important than everyone else's at the time. History, to me, is made by individuals, but I am interested in how those individuals work together in harmony or in opposition for better outcomes for the many. And so I will not be highlighting biographies. Sometimes there'll be partial memoirs, like Walking in the Wind. John Lewis's biography memoir is really cataloging the movement. It's a little bit about his life, but it's a lot about the movement and why he joined and why it had strength. And so that's what I'm really interested in. So in case you're looking for these, sorry to disappoint. Again, you can put it in your own favorites list, but that is not my jam. And then here we go. I'm going to have 14 favorites and 8 unreads. So books that are on my shelf that I want to read that I think will be good. But if I take a pause after the favorites and you think I've missed a big issue, let me know and I will pause and ask about that. Yeah. Okay. So 14 read. 14 favorites. They represent, and hopefully this will not be surprising to any of you guys, climate collective crisis, class struggle and elitism, rural versus urban struggle, intersectionality. And let me know if you need more detail on any of these words. I'm just sort of like keywording this for myself. Imperialism and colonialism's legacy and or history, corruption, the myth of globalization, how democracies lose their institutions, how those in power hide their power, how government minutiae save or destroy lives, and how the numbers of the masses have worked together for mutual aid and fought back. So those are all things that I've read about and the reasons why I really connected with them. So as I scanned the titles, I went that. So that's what I pulled out, and we'll go over the books now. All right, so these are the ones I have on my shelf. And I guess I'm going to go, I'm going to go over this part first. How it occurred to me. So the first one is Masha Gessen. Many of you have probably seen this. Many of you have probably read it. Their book, Surviving Autocracy. This is a journalist who came out of Russia and is now in exile because their life is in danger there, as a persecuted minority, non-binary person. Surviving Autocracy is the one about how democracies lose their institutions. Masha Gessen does a fabulous job explaining the instances where they see in the headlines in America, and this is like 2016-ish, Trump's rise to power and his disdain and contempt for processes and egalitarianism in any form or fashion. So as we cede on technicalities, a lot of these institutions, like the power of the institutions disappears. So I thought this was really good in cataloging and keeping for posterity. And this is why I'm glad I have this on the shelf so that it can't be digitally erased from the internet. What it used to be like and how things have eroded so quickly. So really, really powerful. Number one. Number two, I have a fabulous buddy read from last year. This is Naomi Klein, No Logo. Quite an old book. So I was toying with the idea of not reading it, even though Jim had told me that it was really good. And then my friend Anya, who is also a Climathon co-host, said, I'll read it. I have it. And so we read it together and got a ton out of it, because while it is 25 plus years old, it is, again, documenting the changing of our system from a somewhat balanced economic system to one that is hitched to powers that are greater than the nation state. So corporations became more powerful than the nation state. And we had this hope for globalization leading to more peace, leading to more connected economies like the EU. But in effect, what it did is give multinational corporations more power than the state. And they have used that leverage to extract corporate profit, and the greed is unmatched. It has continued in the past 25 years. And so this is showing, again, a lot of the early fissures and how things got the way they are today. So No Logo by Naomi Klein. Want to keep it on the shelves. Really good political book for how things got to be the way they are. Sorry. Especially with how popular culture perceived them and interacted with that political process. So really, really good book. I'm going to have to put all these back and find where they were on the shelf. That's going to be annoying. Oh, well. Okay, the next one I read a few years ago now, and that is Jane Mayer's Dark Money. And Jane Mayer is she mostly a journalist? I think so. So this book is what revealed to me the length of time that the Republicans and the conservative right have been working to assemble the machinery that they are now deploying. So in America, as I said, maybe the 90s, we had sort of a balanced economy, but these folks that she's detailing that had a lot of money to influence politics started in the 80s with deregulation, sorry. And all these sorts of choices led to more and more expansive, greedy corruption choices. And she basically traces those seeds from like the Civil Rights Act, and we thought we were making headway, to the backlash and the slow building and the focus that they had, the Koch brothers especially. She goes into detail. And up to Citizens United, which, as we know, is a law that opened the floodgates. I think it was like 2011, 2012. Open the floodgates to dark money, meaning money that didn't have to say where it was coming from. And so you didn't know who was responsible for paying for a bunch of ads, who was directly influencing the politician who was receiving the money, who was responsible for putting people in office. And so you had these sort of shady people directing things. And yeah, that's again how we got where we are. And she did a great job tracing all those things from the intent to the organization to the money to each step in the change in policies to where we are now, which is like we have no way to control um, uh, money in elections. I think we have one ideal of how elections work, and it's so far from that it's just given over to cynicism. And that's a big problem with politics today and why people don't participate in politics. So if you understood more about it, like from this book, I think people would be more energized or motivated to vote a different way. So I thought that was really a good illustration. That was really good. I wish she would write another book. She was really well sorted in knowledge and how she wrote. So I really liked her methods. Let's see. That one was about corruption. The next one I have is about the colonialism and imperialism. It's the Black Ghost of Empire by Chris Manjapra, and the subtitle is The Long Death of Slavery and the Failure of Emancipation. And you may have heard me talking about this without the book cover because I actually listened to it on audio from Libro.fm, and then when I saw the paperback at a used bookstore, I went, oh, I have to get this because now I can take notes on it, right? So when I listened to it, what I found really eye-opening was that in American schools, we hear about the death of slavery only in the American context, meaning the Civil War, Lincoln, etc. And this book puts into context the other empires who had slavery and how it was abolished or how the slaves were emancipated. And there's a big difference, and I didn't know the difference because I never studied Latin between abolish and emancipate. So that's a big theoretical framework I picked up from this book. So then we got to compare how France did, what Haiti came to embody, what Spain did, how Cuba came to be in the special position it is now, and what Britain did, because Britain and America had a different road to letting go of slavery and its institutions and the wealth they had accumulated through it. So I thought this was fantastic. And in terms of knowing how we got where we are and what perhaps we owe the populations that have been trampled to get here, I thought this was a very powerful study and mapping of those differences. So really, really good. Greg says, Alan and I learned a lot about Turkish politics when we were in prison together in Diyarbakir. Did I miss something? Diyarbakir is not a pleasant place to be in prison, I would say. And then we got another hello, and then from Julie, Margaret, dark money sounds infuriating, to be sure. But it's illuminating because you realize people have to plan 40 years for this kind of takeover to happen. You think it's just hit like this with the Trump and the turn of the people who will believe anything because of the media collapse, but it's not. It's people who have worked away at this behind the scenes for a long time. And so we need to be just as single-willed and just as unified on the important institutional issues. So yeah, I thought that was powerful. So yeah, so this one, and I don't have a clear separation of the definitions of colonialism and imperialism in my head because to me they have a lot of the same effects. Empire in this book refers to the comparisons that the author is making between the four great powers. I think he also talks about Portugal maybe, but colonialism is the way the empire operated the economy, right? So you had a center core and you had a periphery and you had extraction from the periphery to the center. And enrich the core. So there's this culture and economical process that I think of as colonialism, but that may not be exactly the right way to divide those words. But until someone corrects me, I'll just keep that in my head. So this is a really good book. And the last one I have in this group will be a classic from, oh my goodness, how old is this one? Bell Hooks. So it's the only Bell Hooks that I've read, and I do need to read some more. It's from 2000, so 25 years old. Again, a classic. It's called Where We Stand, Class Matters by Bell Hooks. And there's the cover. So this book is by a person who has, I think, been more famous for talking about intersectionality, and reading this book about class first by them, I think, was interesting for me because I understand class matters better than other experiences. I think we've got race, we've got gender, we've got class as like the main ones these days. And it's a very short book. It's pretty simple. It's talking about contemporary in the year 2000 examples of how class is sort of a conduit for all the other inequalities, right? So if in America we think class is not a system, it's not something that we've inherited like the Brits have that they struggle with. We think we're an egalitarian society. Bell Hooks is here to say, think again, because we have racism and sexism and all these other isms. There is a caste system. We just don't acknowledge it. And so I found this to be a very good illustration of simple words, but like really profound truths. So if you're looking for something to sort of ponder slowly or go through quickly and then just sort of sit and think about, great book, political book. So, and I need to read some more Bell Hooks. It's a good one. So I've got more that are going to be digital and then some that are in a separate category for some reason. So I wrote these notes on October 12th. I do prepare for these things. And this one I especially wanted to let cogitate. I wanted to cogitate on it for a while because I feel like more would come out if I let it sit. You know what I mean? And so I have fave political books. And then I had on shelves, I had some different ones. So we'll go over those in a second. And then I had the TBR. So I'm not sure anymore, 24 days ago or whatever it is, what I meant by separating those. But we'll just take a pause and do the digital ones. So let me go share the right screen and then add it to the stream. And then take a sip because my voice is sounding a little gravelly. All right, so fabulous book. Did I read this with Barrett? I think I did. I can't remember now. Yes, I did a buddy read with Barrett Laurie, and this was fantastic. So Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. Barrett had read his book on homelessness called Evicted, and I had not. So I came to this book with no background on the author and not sure what he was going to be talking about. But Poverty by America is a sly commentary about how I always think of the phrase, the poor will always be with us, which might be a Bible quote, might be some, I don't know, 19th century Victorianism. People know, help me out here. But the sort of powerlessness that people think they have against poverty, like you can't solve it, right? When meanwhile, we have the budget to feed everyone who is below the poverty line in America if we diverted some of the military budget. Some of the military budget. I think even some of the increase of the ICE budget, right? So it's a ridiculously small amount of money compared with the size of our economy. And it just shows our priorities are to not eliminate poverty, And you could see that by the fact that we did away with the Agency for International Development. We no longer are concerned about global poverty. We've just kicked them out of the whole building and replaced them with Customs and Border Patrol in that building. So American priorities. This is Matthew Desmond's excoriating proclamation that America is profiting by keeping people poor. And I think he talks a lot about the shrinking of the middle class, how when I say we sort of had a balance, it was like there was poverty line that had benefits, there was working class, there was middle class, there was upper, there was rich elite, right? And it was a sort of pyramid. Well, now the pyramid has gotten like this, like this, like this. Like there's, I don't know, what is this? A tiny hut in a desert rather than a pyramid. And the squeezing of the middle class and the making precarious anyone's existence unless they're a rich elite is this transformation that Matthew Desmond is documenting. And I think it's really powerful. There were parts in this that were very affecting and personal stories, and he did a lot of research, and I don't know what his background is. I don't know if it was journalism or activism or a mix, but really powerful interviewing. He reminded me of how Barbara Ehrenreich sort of just like talked with the people and nickel and dimed and got to know their lives, and just had a lot of empathy. So yeah, really fantastic book. Political favorite. Aha. Greg's given me the quote, "For you always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me," from Matthew 26:11. Nicely played. Well done. Okay, so it is an actual biblical source. Woof. And Lynn says, my library has Black Ghost of Empire, definitely now on my TBR. It was really good. Really good. Vin says, Poverty by America sounds like it equally applies to the UK, especially with current upcoming budget speculation. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I never know if I have a clear view of another country's politics as well as I have of my own country, because I've heard different things, but it could just be because there's only a few media outlets that I listen to that are harping on the same things. But yeah, interesting. Yeah, definitely tell me more, because that's pretty cool. Hi, Emma. Hello, hello, hello. She booped the like button. Thank you, friend. Favorite political books? Anybody have any to recommend? I did warn people to, as they go through these favorites with me, if you think I'm missing out an issue, if you think I'm like have something missing, please put your favorites that are not represented in the chat. So we'll get to that soon. All right, so Poverty is the first one. And then the next here, I'll switch over to Alicia Garza. This book I read a few years ago, The Purpose of Power, How We Come Together When We Fall Apart. I thought it was fabulous. So this is a person who is about my age. She was involved in starting the Black Lives Matter movement, and she had a lot of experiences, grassroots organizing. And so for me, having wanted to be in on that and then sort of gone on a different path, I found it both like upsetting and like hard to hear the road that I hadn't gone personally, but also really valuable in terms of the lessons that she learned and is relating in this book. Like really, really good. She seems amazing. I would love to go to an event where she talked. One of the things that I connected with the most was her talking about, I think there's an area in San Francisco or Oakland near the port where there was a lot of pollution during World War II, and it was used as a base. And that was an area where a lot of Black folks lived because of the housing prices when the rest of the area was rising and becoming unaffordable. And so there were these conflicting needs of like health outcomes being terrible, but also people living there for generations and not wanting to leave. And she was involved in the neighborhood canvassing and the organizing, and that was where she cut her teeth. That's a fun expression, on getting to know how it worked and like losing some of her naivete. And I thought, oh wow, I've heard of that place, and you know, she's talking about landmarks that I know. And it was just really neat because it was something in my backyard. Like, I went to school near there, and it's my estate. And yeah, just wrapping it up. She talks about family things. She talks about, it's definitely like part memoir, but it's definitely about learning as she went and figuring out what works in different circumstances and how to adapt. And I thought that was really good. So again, I'd love to see another book from her, or like attend an event. She'd be fantastic. Greg asks, is this a political book? How to talk to your cat about gun safety and abstinence, drugs, Satanism, and other dangers that threaten their 9 lives by Zachary Auburn. I don't know. I don't know. Is it talking about all those topics and using the cat as humor? Then perhaps. Perhaps. All right. So my next digital book to share is by Clint Smith. It's called How the Word is Passed. And again, I don't have a physical copy of this one because I listened to it. And just a little shout out here. We love Libro.fm for audiobooks, the sweetest smelling audiobook purveyor in the world that doesn't ruin economies and trip international satellites for people's Wi-Fi. So Libro.fm, if you have it available to you, please avail yourself of their audiobook deals. They're a fabulous small company. But that's how I got How the Word is Passed. And this refers to, the title may be a bit opaque for you. It refers to how stories are told. So in a similar way to the Black Ghost of Empire, I didn't learn about any of those other empires' dealings with slavery as an institution and how it evolved and changed through history. So How the Word is Passed is Clint Smith going through specific places, especially historical landmarks, museums, places that are there ostensibly to keep the past alive and teach people about history. But he was reckoning with, how are they teaching history? Are they giving the real facts? Are they grappling with different perspectives? And it was really powerful. So let's see if I can make it visible. Probably not big enough for you guys, but I'll read out part of it. So he starts at New Orleans. Yeah, his hometown is New Orleans. He starts there. I think he goes to one of the prisons that begins with an A. Let's see. So he goes to Virginia on the Monticello plantation and sees what's changed there. There it is. The Whitney plantation is the one I was thinking of. Oh, Angola. That's the one I was thinking of. Former plantation turned maximum security prison in Louisiana. He's also in New York City. I remember he takes a walking tour, and there's like some surprising things that you learn about in New York City, Manhattan even. And basically, and there was another one like deep in Virginia where it's like a Confederate cemetery. And he's like, why? Why? So I found it really valuable that he respectfully, civilly engages with the people and then writes about what he thinks needs to be discussed, or how they're doing well, how they're falling down in their responsibilities. And I just found that really valuable. I love a historical museum. I will always go to a town's historical museum. I was just looking them up for Oxford and Cambridge yesterday because I'm, fantasizing about travel, dreaming about travel again. And I was like, oh, what would be the big museums there? Because I want to learn about the history of the places that I visit. And what he's saying is that when you go to these places, you need to be on your guard, or at least have a healthy skepticism. Like, know your world history, know the framing, so that when you are told a story, you can evaluate whether it jives with reality as you know it or not. And I found that really, really good. And he's just a really good writer. I'd read a poetry book of his before this because he was a poet. And then he came out with this, and I found the poetry even accessible to me. And I'm not a poet. So yeah, he writes really evocatively and expressively and persuasively. So highly recommend. And these are not new releases. These are all at least a few years old. So hopefully you can find them in your library or request them. if you have that capability. Lynn says, Dying from Improvement, Inquests and Inquiries into Indigenous Deaths in Custody by Shireen H. Razak is so informative and powerful. Ooh, okay, so I'm going to star that. That sounds like a good recommendation for carceral system critique as well as Indigenous rights history. So yeah, two really powerful issues. And then also Lynn has Washington Bullets, A History of the CIA, Coups and Assassinations by Vijay Prashad is a great primer, especially regarding Central and South America. Very important right now. Ooh, and a good book for Dr. November if you're into like the spy fiction. Not fiction, spy nonfiction. Yeah, that sounds like a good one. So that is talking about not corruption, because I think corruption refers more to power and money, but what would you say? The issue is transparency. I think that's how I would characterize it, that when you expect your government to be transparent, it's not, because it's hiding all its wrongdoing and acting undemocratically. Yeah, the myth. Great recommendations. I starred both of those. Wait. Oh, no, I starred Leslie's. Leslie had a comment, so I got mixed up here. Leslie says, how the word is passed. I was in Tennessee a couple years ago for a wedding, and the wording of some of the historical placards around town was a bit suspect of how historical events were framed. Yeah. Isn't it crazy? Like, I think of, I'm reading how Walking with the Wind, the memoir of John Lewis, and he's talking about Alabama and Mississippi being some of the worst offenders during the civil rights movement, and the attacks and the just the vehemence, just the violence of the hatred it's creepy, to know that exists and probably persists. So yeah, that's why those wordings of the placards don't change from decade to decade. Oh boy. Okay. So I think the fourth digital asset I have to share here of political favorites is the Indian card. I'm sorry, I need to scroll back up here. The Indian Card, Who Gets to Be Native in America by Carrie Lowry Schuett-Peltz. And I listened to the audio version. Again, thank you, Libro.fm. And tried to read this with Amy, but she got diverted off the path, and I think read some of it, but we'll see when she comes back to give her review. So this is part memoir, part sort of like diving into the bowels of government files, which does not sound exciting, but she makes it really narratively compelling. And for someone who doesn't know about a lot of the inner workings and history of the flip-flopping of Indigenous law, this was really a good primer. So I read this a couple years ago at the same time that I was listening to a podcast. So I was waiting for a book to come out, and the book took forever at the library. So I just listened to the whole podcast, which is basically the book. And they were somewhat related. There was a little bit of overlap, right? So in the Indian card, when we're talking about Indigenous law, first we have the treaties issue, which many were not honored. And so the myth of nation talking to nation was just blown out of the water, and they were horrendously taken advantage of and violently attacked in many cases. Then besides treaties, you've got whether they are citizens or not, and how they are. So treaties often will dictate that there's benefits, right? So treaty means you hand over land, you have this land, and you're owed this payment for use of the land or something. And then the citizen part came when they wanted to end those benefits. So there's all this legal wrangling about how much the government owes the nations of the different indigenous cultures over the years. And depending on which was cheaper and which was more expedient, or which gave them more access to natural resources that they could extract, those tides shifted. And so this book talks a lot about that. And also how Government minutia, this was the thing that I said at the beginning, saves or destroys lives, because whether you are included in a community or not determines whether or not you're welcome to participate in that culture sometimes, or have access to the benefits. And that, as we're seeing now with SNAP and everything, access to benefits can make or break someone's whole life. So that was really a good exploration. The overlap with the other book, and I can't think of it right now because I didn't read it, I just listened to it, is with adoption. So, sort of a third issue, I would say, the biggest one in the mind of a lot of people at the moment is residential schools. And that's what we had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Canada for. We still have not reckoned with that in any equivalent way in America. But residential schools were an attempt by the government to break the culture, to take the children away and assimilate them into Anglo culture, take away the religion, take away the culture, outlaw the ceremonies, and just break apart the generations. Parents and children can't talk to each other. So there's that. And then following on that, much related to that, is the adoption crisis. So right now, and there's one more issue I'll say that is more on the podcast that I listen to, the adoption agencies. So because I don't know why, I'm not going to attempt to do it why, but for reasons, a lot of Indigenous children were taken away from their families. The state, the government, decided that they were not doing well there, and so they would do better in foster homes. And so they put them in the adoption system, never saw their families again. And if you've been paying attention, the adoption system in America is very sus. just suspect in a lot of different ways. And this is one of the reasons why it's become sort of a for-profit, kind of like education, for-profit institution where a lot of money gets pumped in and goes to the lawyers. And families are broken apart, and it's disproportionately affecting certain populations, like the Indigenous population. So that's a whole thing that's talked about in the podcast. And then related to the adoption and the casino issue is, sovereignty over land. And I forget how it relates. There was like one really important issue that was mixing the two, and I can't remember what it was, but just knowing about these things makes my antenna go up, right? So political books are there to make you aware of the undercurrents so that you have a broader understanding of the world. And when someone tries to tell you a story, your media literacy kicks in, your skepticism kicks in, you know what is real because you've read about it, and you can judge whether someone's sensational story makes sense or not. So that's very helpful. Hi, Mom. Good morning. Wording to slant history is not limited to the past. It's very much in the present. Yes, media literacy, hence what I was just saying. And then witness the hiring of so many public relations staff for most local governments. Yes. So this is Mom's experience is how the word is passed. The last book we talked about is how the story is told, right? So if you are putting much more money these days into public relations, you can guess that your priority is tell it slant rather than help the people with the resources that they need to succeed, for sure. Lynn says, one of the most thought-provoking for me in the last few years was reading Neither Settler Nor Native, The Making and Unmaking of Permanent Minorities by Mahmoud Mamdani. Brain's gotta be focused. Oh, so it's like a very dense read. That sounds really interesting. Yeah. Okay, so I'm starting this too because what's interesting about this one is permanent minorities. A lot of the storytelling in the media today and the jockeying for political position has to do with power in numbers and respect accorded different minorities and the identities of those minorities themselves. How do they identify? Who do they aspire to be lumped with, kind of thing? So yeah, that sounds really interesting. Leslie says a lot of oil money is behind displacing of Indigenous children. And I would say casino money, because you can trade the rights for a casino on non-native land for, money deals or legal things. I can't remember what the issue was. It was like a couple years ago now, but it blew my mind. But yeah. Yeah. And getting back to history, like Oklahoma and the oil boom and um Flower Moon, Killers of the Flower Moon. That is horrendous. I didn't think the book was very well done, and I haven't seen the movie, so I can't comment on it, but the actual historical facts, horrendous. All right, I'm on my last digital thing here, and we're going back into history for Jane Addams. So, 20 Years at Hull House. This is actually a positive political book. This was written early in the 20th century, is it 10 or 01? Let me click over so that I can see. 1910. So this book is talking about Hull House, which is a community house, social housing, and institution that Jane Addams, who is a young socialite in Chicago, put together with some friends and organized and learned through doing, and reaching out to the immigrant community. So Chicago, as you know, has a reputation today, but back in the day in 1900, I would say one of the most fascinating things from this is learning that there were these maps where, for insurance purposes, rather than redlining real estate purposes, but similar vibe, um, they went door by door to inquire which languages were spoken in which house. So they knew how immigrants organized themselves, how they clustered together, which neighborhoods went, which ethnicities, which took the new arrivals and all this kind of stuff. So Hull House was situated in amongst these immigrant neighborhoods where a lot of the time people were scrabbling for money. They were taking lower paying jobs. They were trying to figure out how to educate their children, how to make ends meet, etc. And so a resource that was being put together to help educate people, to help people meet, give them spaces to meet where they wouldn't be hassled by the police, for example. Organize cultural activities that validated their home countries rather than telling them you can only assimilate if you want to succeed was really, really valuable. And I wanted to write something about this, but it's in a digital drawer. I couldn't figure out how to end it. So it's still up here, but I just found this period of history and this location really fascinating because I think New York City has a similar vibe, but it's been written about so much. I really wanted to focus, kind of like I didn't want to focus on the Jacobite campaign of 1745. I wanted to focus on a different place and a different experience. And Chicago at the turn of the 20th century, at the Gilded Age, the labor movement coming up, the populism movement dying out. Like there was a lot of strings being pulled, and you have a World's Fair there. So like I was really excited to have all those things play in. And it's pretty fascinating. So great political book for organizing, for meeting people where they are, and neat, just neat. I always forget it's Wednesday until I see Margaret streaming. Hi, Eloise. Julie says, all right, my son went to Jane Addams Elementary School and the children learned all about Hull House. I learned about it as well. Awesome. I went to visit and took a tour and really loved it when I was there a few years ago. And I gave up looking for the second book. There's a 20 years later, but this one was the really popular one, and the ones after like never got printed, so it's impossible to find a copy. But yeah, that would have been really good. But the house is pretty cool. I think it's been moved or remodeled, so it's very different, especially what surrounds it, the university. But yeah, she's great. She's great. Okay. So I think let me check. I did those. Okay. So we can pause now. I can take this down and we can move on to the TBR. So those are my 14. We have 3 really good suggestions. Were there any big issues that you think, what about this? I didn't see this covered in those 14. I'll give you a moment while I take a drink. All right. I'm going to go on to just read my sum up of my unreads, right? So I have 8 books that are unread, that are on my shelf, that are on my TBR for politics, and these are the issues that they cover. My unread books that I'll go over talk about majority-minority government, so talking about permanent minorities, that's a good one. Labor collective struggle, the burden of explaining oppression to an oppressor, innovations in housing policies, tipping points, futurism, intersectionality, so that's a repeat, and integrating scientific methods. So we've got some new issues here, but I'm still curious. So, excuse me, I'll leave this banner up in case people get ideas. What tea am I drinking? I am drinking Yorkshire Red, the one in the red box. And it's got tea and sugar in it. Yesterday, I actually had a Yorkshire black tea, and I let it stew a little too long, but I put basil in because I had a basil in a bouquet that was going bad. It was drying up. It was lovely. Basil black tea. I invented a new thing. It was lovely. Did you do the climate books? Oh, no, you're right. I haven't done those yet. Yeah, I had. Thank you, Julie. Okay, so I had this stack and I thought I covered them. I'm not sure why I put these aside, but these are for 5 more books? 4 more books. Okay, so thank you. Books that I've read, favorites, this is the climate one. We Are the Weather by Jonathan Safran Foer. And while I had some issues with the structure of the book, it's nonfiction, and his tone, how I felt it was a little condescending. I thought the stuff that he brought up was really good. So just, let's see. I'm trying to separate this from The Uninhabitable Earth. This is a lot of facts and figures about how what we are doing or choosing to do is affecting the climate. We are the weather now. We are changing the earth. And so this is I won't say simple because he doesn't word it simply. He does a lot of fancy argumentation kind of stuff. But if you're looking for things to back you up as to like why you should eat less meat, that's his big thing because he wrote Eating Animals about being vegan. And he admits he messes up. He has exceptions. He goes back, but the effect of meat eating, of land use change, and oil extraction, I think are the main ones he talks about. I always think about plastics, but he's thinking about warming. So rather than pollution and waste buildup, he's thinking about the warming, which is affected more by how we eat, and those choices that we make. So just bringing it home, I thought that was a really good one. I like the cover too. Pretty neat. You've seen this one on my channel before, All We Can Save. So this is a really positive book. It's a lot of contributors in different areas talking about projects that they are implementing to save parts of our civilization in the climate crisis. So a lot of different environmental things ranging from small to large, from east to west, from microbiology to health outcomes, right? So it's all different sorts of things. So it's really a positive book, and like, yeah, heartwarming, really, really good. So that's a favorite that I've talked about many times as a favorite in many contexts. Here we go. Labor and Capital in the Gilded Age. I don't know if people remember me talk about this. This would be an impossible book to find. It's from the Library of Congress. So it's edited by John A. Garrity. It's called Testimony of the Times: Selections from Congressional Hearings by Little Brown and Company. So it's a published book, but it's congressional testimony. And it's basically what happened in the Gilded Age is like they called up a bunch of witnesses and they asked them about this strike and that strike and this negotiation and that negotiation between some of the bigwigs during the Gilded Age period. And it's some wild stories told in vernacular. So they actually, will write it in the way that people talked. And I think if it's in Congress, it's DC, but it's people from a few different, mostly Eastern cities, I think, like 1880s, 1890s. Really eye-opening and great first, like, primary source material for my Chicago book if I ever get back to it. So I thought that was really good, especially since, like, this is reflecting where we are now. Like, the people are so rich they can never spend the amount of money that they have, yet they cannot let go of it. They cannot let go of wanting more, more, more. And so that gets us in this political situation where people are trying to live and trying to tell the people at the top, you can't survive if we don't. Like, you need to get this through your head. Like, you need workers. Your wealth depends on workers. And at this point, it doesn't really, because it's all imaginary, but we'll leave that aside. Cryptocurrency nonsense. Get away from me with that shit. Okay, and then this one, Greg will recognize. I talked about this a little bit ago, and I talked about it a lot a few years ago. The Populist Moment by Lawrence Goodwin, Short History of the Agrarian Revolt in America. And so this was a fascinating book about how they got farmers together, they got granges, they organized across vast distances in the Midwest. They had viable political candidates. They had people of courage standing up at small town elections. They had super long-winded speech makers. They had all of this energy behind a movement. But I'm reading another book that's talking about populism and fascism and how they're different. And I think we get into a little bit of a semantic cul-de-sac, and it doesn't really matter at this point. There's a populism that is healthy, and there's a populism that is uninformed. So that's just know that there's a difference in historical context. And so this is a really good primer on agrarian populism in the 1880s and how it sort of just deflated and lost its power in the cities and how it transferred to the labor movement in the early 1900s. So really, really good book. Okay, so I covered all the top favorites. Jim, I already mentioned you when I talked about Naomi Klein. So you've already been name dropped and conjured into existence. Excellent. Let's catch up here. Lynn's sticking out the tongue. Okay. Have I talked about The Line Becomes a River, Dispatches from the Border? Yes, I think in your own videos, but not here on my channel. So I thought this seems really interesting. Talking about border politics, immigration, I thought is pretty interesting, by Francisco Cantu. And I grew up knowing some Cantus in my school. So, I mean, that's how I said it. It's probably not how you're supposed to say it. That's how they said it. So we'll use that. We'll put that on our recommended reads. Then is filling me in on current political shifts here, leading to significant small party growth here. Makes the minority government topic interesting, especially when our voting system significantly favors a two-party system. Minority government topic. Okay, so that moves into my to-be-read pile, right? So this is a book that I picked up that is on my shelf to read. It's called We Were 8 Years in Power by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And he is a Black scholar, fiction author, as well as political commentator. So like giant in the fields, right? Both fields. And this is, it's called An American Tragedy. So this is his detailing of Obama's 8 years in power and how we came with such a wave, speaking of blue waves, and with such hope. And I think there's a whole generation that has had to grapple with, why didn't we get as much as we wanted accomplished? Or why didn't we get anywhere near, right? So when I think about majority minority, this is what I was thinking of, because right now we feel hamstrung because we don't have the courts. Well, we don't have the Supreme Court. We don't have the houses, and we don't have the White House as Democrats. And so where are the various levers of power? The only levers of power that we have are in the federal court system that is not the Supreme Court. So it's very tenuous. And I think one of the main goals of a democracy is having minority protections. So if you think populism in the bad way, like majority rule, mob rule, that's like the one end of the spectrum of a democracy, right? And the fact that we have laws, rights, all that stuff to prohibit that, or to restrain it, I should say, means that protection of minorities is one of the bellwethers of whether it's a healthy government system. And right now we're not doing too well on that. We don't have a way to push through things because we're outnumbered and in the political system. And yet we are the majority. So because of all the conniving that was done over 40 years by smart people who were very focused with the Electoral College and the state electoral systems and all these little pieces of power, they have all the major levers. And we need to figure out how the people, the majority of people in the country, the popular vote, can actually make things happen so that our rights are preserved. It's the majority of people, but it's a minority in politics. That's what the problem is, I think. Greg says, my master's is about Gilded Age America. I don't know the book Labor and Capital, but it sounds great. It was really fascinating. It's just like testimonies, right? So it's literally, this person says this person says this. There's very little commentary. I think he does like a page at the beginning of each to give some context. The editor does. And then it's just like congressional testimony, which today would be super infuriating. I can't even watch congressional testimony because people just lie. Like there's no accountability. I feel like I've heard maybe one or two cases where people who lied to Congress actually got indicted or, prosecuted for something. There's no consequences. Greg says, Goodwin probably cites O. Gene Clinton's Kansas populism. I don't know that one. I mean, it's been like 5 years since I read that book. So he could well have done, and I don't remember. Hi, Jim. Capital P populism usually refers to the political party of the late 19th century, the People's Party. It's like the difference between Democrats with a D and democracy. There's a further distinction that the book I'm currently reading, which is on pause, makes, which is between fascism and populism in different countries, which is bigger than this distinction in American politics. But yes, that's a good contextual aid. Lynn says, but we have to face the fact that people we respect, once elected, usually serve the powerful. We have to hold them accountable for that. Yeah. Jane Mayer's Dark Money, right? So if we respect them, we think they're going to be accountable to the people who elect them, and then see that they are swayed by the people who contributed to their campaign. That is an argument for restricting the money that can go into campaigns, because it's absolutely ridiculous. I think that millions go into campaigning and ads and media, which is just going to the elite, right? It's just going to Murdoch, to brainwash people, to have like dog whistles in the ads and stuff. Forgot to finish my thought. Dr. Clanton, Screamin' Jean Clanton, was my advisor. Oh, okay. Okay. So you're saying the connection. Yeah, that's pretty neat. And that book, I think, is from the 70s. So scholar on populism. That's very cool. Okay. So we'll pass on from what I missed, since I don't think we have any definitive things on that, but you can chew away at it and put it in the comments if you think of something later. Like I said, this is my first TBR. I've got 8, I think. Labor struggles. So this is a gal, Kim Kelly, who I have learned about through social media, Twitter, several years ago, since I'm not on there anymore. The Untold History of American Labor. The book is called Fight Like Hell. She is known as Grim Kim on Twitter, and she is at the heart of a lot of like lobbying for labor and organizing, whether it's Starbucks, whether it's Amazon. And I think she does a great job of like holding the line of being grounded and just standing for the principles of labor, which is representation, which is a collective, which is not getting bought out. So no dark money. Fight like hell. Excited to read that. Should have read it by now, but I haven't. Then we've got, this is what I was talking about when I said the oppressor learning about the issues from the oppressed, the burden of teaching them, right? So this is Rennie Edo-Lodge's Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. This little like engraved or whatever that's called on the dust jacket. So this came out. She's Black British writer, I believe. Yeah, London-based award-winning journalist. And this came out around 2020. And I think, and I've heard a lot of talk about this and her writing since then. The idea is, as I said, there is a disproportionate burden for oppressed people, meaning people who have been marginalized, people whose rights have been infringed historically for a long time, Indigenous folks, permanent minorities, to educate others about the history that we don't learn about, that white people don't learn about in school, right? So I didn't know about a lot of things that I've read about as an adult. And I think there's an expectation that it's their responsibility. The minority communities, if they want us to know, they will tell us. And that's a very entitled way of thinking, to my mind, because in the same way that in a abusive relationship, the abused person has to pay attention to every move, mood, change in behavior of the abuser to preserve themselves. That's a metaphor for how marginalized communities have had to observe and absorb and be cognizant of white mainstream culture to get along, to survive. And we have not had to do any of the same observation, paying attention, acknowledging, learning. And so that's the very starting point for this, I think, and why I do so much reading and why I always sign off or try to sign off with diversify that reading shelf, because I think it's on us to learn more about folks that we never learned about, because we live on the same world. They are a human majority to white folks. And like, why aren't we curious? There's a reason. And I don't agree with that reason. So this is why I'm fighting back. But I haven't read it yet. I just heard a lot about it. Let's see. Oh, let me. Eloise says we need to bring back exile. Well, we don't have any places to exile people, friend. I was listening to a video essay about the democracy in ancient Athens, and the way exile worked made me think they were really onto something, right? Right? And I think in indigenous systems, one of the options was expulsion from the tribe, and that would be like in earlier societies, you would die if you didn't have the support of the tribe to do all the gathering, to do all the preserving, to do all the shelter making. Like, you would die. So it was pretty effective. I don't know. Yeah, where would you put people? That's the thing. That's when I think about. I was just listening to Omar El-Akkad's book, and he's talking about Guantanamo, and I'm like, well, where would you move the people? If you're afraid of them, maximum security prisons, like, where would you move the people who have done nothing wrong, and therefore you owe it to them to release them? But now you're afraid of them. Like, where would you exile people, Eloise? I'll ask that. The moon? That wouldn't work for Gitmo. Ben says we have 2 wing. I'm not sure what that means. Let me see if I can figure it out. Populism movements here right now. One on the right, which has surged reform, and more recently, where you're seeing the starting of a populist left-wing surge as well to balance it. Does that have a name? That's not your party. That's like a weird labor thing, right? Forming, maybe. Greg says, Margaret, what was the book you read about the Columbia River? It was like death or loss. Let's see. River Lost. There we go. I'll just show it because the cover's easier to remember. A River Lost: The Life and Death of the Columbia by Blaine Harton. And you knew someone related to him or had talked to him or something too. So that was pretty cool. This is a great book too. Good about politics, good about economics. So yeah, it's a good one. Going to have to drop. Great streams, great books. Stay safe all. Oh my gosh, it's 15 minutes past. I did not realize. Eloise says in Athens, it was a 10-year take a lap, and they voted on who needed to boot them from leadership. Oh, so you're talking about the leaders, not like wrongdoers at large. Take the politicians who are acting up and bench them for 10 years. I mean, we should have done that, but there are no consequences. They don't have to leave the country, but they're banned from being involved in anything. Go back to your district, work like a normal person, and have a good think about your choices. Oh, interesting. I haven't heard about this approach. I mean, I think that's too innocuous for some of the wrongs that have been done at the federal level, but I like it. I like the broadness of approaches. It's giving us another tool. Julie says, I'm going to book club tonight wearing my American flag t-shirt and blue earrings. Yay, I'm wearing blue earrings as well. Got a little sparkle. And Dissident Night here. Hello, hello. We're just, I think, wrapping up my TBR for political books. And we got a few good recommendations that I think might round out some of my favorites. So that's great. A few more TBR here. This is Housing the Nation. It's a Rizzoli book, so it's a fancy book. I got this at an architecture bookstore in my hometown. Housing the Nation: Social Equity, Architecture, and the Future of Affordable Housing. So I feel like homelessness is a big issue in a lot of the cities where I live or have lived. And I feel like there's a lot of, not red herring. What's the French? There's a French word that's like a fish expression. I can't think of it right now, but like, it's something that's put there and it's just there to hide something else. And so when we think about just build more housing, that is not solving the problem because of how the housing building process is set up, right? Because of how local governments arrange more housing and what the definitions of affordable are and what the restrictions are on people in those places. So it's not the kafa. Dang it, that's gonna bug me now. But yeah, so I was hoping reading this book, I'd get essays from different people, from architects, from lobbyists, from developers, from different viewpoints that would give me a more well-rounded view. And that was last year. I haven't read it yet, but it's one of these very nice, like it was expensive new, but I thought this is one of the holes. And so I wanted to know more about the issue. So that's on the list. And then this I said was The Tipping Point. It's called The Spirit Level. This is an older book too. I think this is a pretty classic, modern classic. This is from 2009. Okay, not as old as I thought. Why Equality is Better for Everyone by Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett. I just picked this up in Canada. I don't really like the cover. The other version has a better cover. But the spirit level is their metaphor for like equality and inequality. Like there's a tipping point there where you have enough inequality, like people will rise up and riot. And when you have more equality, things are more stable. And so I think the book is going to be about economic arguments. We have inequality and consumerism, sustainability, violence, education. So I think this is going to be a lot of issues in one to support their argument about inequality, which I find very important. And I get a lot of my viewpoints about inequality from my graduate studies in international economics. So hopefully I will be able to converse with the studies that they're quoting and everything. All right, 3 more. We've got What If We Get It Right, which is a positive futurism book. I think it's a lot of different contributors again, but edited by Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, who's now a favorite. She's amazing. And Visions of Climate Futures means what if we get it right, right? Her last book is All We Can Save. So if we have this idea that the civilization is not going to make it as it is, what do we save? What is important? What do we practice right now in community? And then if that builds up and like saves enough of the civilization, what if we get it right? What if the oil barons crash and burn in a flume of fire and we get to start over? Like, I think this is like futuristically imagining what can we start with? What would be the most important? And people getting together to imagine that. So that sounds really good. I got that new as well. Back to a classic, Women, Race, and Class by Angela Way Davis, which I should have read by now. So again, smaller book, but I think it says, oh, no, well, it's kind of got small font. So this, I think, is going to be written later than I thought. Let's see. 1981. Okay, so in the middle, women, race, and class, intersectionality, meaning there's all these isms. How does it affect different populations, and how do we fight and fight together without fighting amongst ourselves, kind of thing? I don't know. Maybe she has a totally different angle for this, but like, I want to read Angela Davis. I need to read Angela Davis. So that's a good one. And then the final one is like a newer one again. Fresh Banana Leaves by Jessica Hernandez. This is Healing Indigenous Landscapes Through Indigenous Science. And this is what I characterized as integrating scientific methods, meaning kind of like Robin Wall Kimmerer, who I have read 3 books by now. We have the Western science approach, which thinks it knows everything and needs to get some humility. And we have the indigenous approaches, which I think are much more open to collaboration. And so this, I think, will both have examples of one like group's approach, but also findings of how they can work together and be more than the sum of their parts. And so I'm really interested to learn about that, and should have read this before now, but only so many reading hours in a day. What can I say? So, that has been an amazing sum up of my favorite political books and the 8 unreads that I think will become favorites. So yay. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Lynn says tiny homes had promise, but in Canada, at least, they've shut that down and made it unaffordable. Interesting. Like in the cities in the South? I haven't heard about that, but that would be an interesting thing to hear journalists write up of. If you have any of those stories, please send either email or Voxer. I don't know. I don't have an email address for you, but yeah, send me something on a community post or whatever. Yeah, tiny homes do have promise. I think ADUs, as my mom has said, are a really good short fix way if we can't address the overarching inequality, like get the small things out that at least meet needs in as a stopgap measure, because the homelessness is just out of control. Lynn says, yes, Angela Davis. Yay. Eva says, great list. Thank you. Yeah. I did narrow it down. Like I said at the beginning, I'm acknowledging it's US centric. I'm acknowledging there's no biographies. That's my little bias. But if you're curious about any of these, especially the TBR, and you want to read them together, any of these are on your shelf, let me know. I am not taking, I have them. So I could choose between one of these for the end of the year, but it might be cutting it a little close for a buddy read. But if you're interested next year, let me know. Let me know. Drop me a line. Leslie says Jessica Hernandez is coming out with a new book, Growing Papaya Trees. Oh, nice. So fresh banana leaves and growing papaya trees. I love it, especially because these are like tropical plants. And I think we are not used to learning from tropical societies. So I think that could be a really good learning. Good learning. Eva says tiny homes are the modern day twist on a mobile home park, and many cities and areas don't allow those anymore. Guess why? I just saw a story about a mobile home park where the person who owned the mobile home park sold it, and everyone who had 20-year leases got shorted, and then their rents went up immediately. And I was like, that's not right. That's not right. Areas don't allow those anymore. Guess why? Is it zoning changes? Could it be? Yeah. Are they trying to put in data centers? That would be like the twist. The knife in the back. Just twist it. Yeah. Yeah. They don't allow it anymore because they want people to be living precarious lives and not able to focus on organizing and demanding what they're due. That's my take. That's my take. US says it's like a tiny HOA. And so those who they'd want to live there aren't the sorts that need the houses to thwart homelessness. Oh, so the spirit of the HOA is like rising from the redlining 1960s and 70s and inhabiting these new mobile home parks? Is that? Oh man. Yeah. Yeah. We gotta talk about the NIMBYism and the community consolidation and getting to know strangers. I know I'm just working on baby steps, but like I'm further than I was. So please join me in the baby steps and get to know your neighbors. Oh my gosh. This has been fantastic. I did not realize I would go on this long. I'm just going to let you know about upcoming live chat. I will be on Elaine's channel, Cobalt Dragon, and I think we're just going to be talking about books and life. She wants to talk about publishing costs, but I'm not really in that mind frame, so I will probably just talk about books, and hopefully we don't go too much into the fact that I'm not writing anything right now. Yeah, so Elaine's wonderful, and I'll be over on her channel tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific. So I'll just drop the link in the chat if you want to attend and just like chat for a couple hours or drop in and out. Elaine likes to chat, so it'll probably go a little longer than this even. But let me know if you guys have events on your radar, and then we'll sign off for the day. Yeah, of course. You are welcome. Any other events people have on their radar? I did read What You Own. I did the buddy reads, so you guys know where I am. I will be leaving to go back to California in a couple weeks, so planning with that. And yeah, I'll just give a few more seconds, take another sip. Anyone feel inspired to do their own favorite political books? That would be fun. All right, so I've starred the recommendations, and as soon as I blink out, I will put those on my story graph. So thank you very much for the recommendations. And yeah, appreciate you guys' attention. Thanks for watching. And again, if you think I missed an important issue out with my favorites, drop your recommendations for favorite political books down below. And remember, do diversify that reading shelf. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you again soon on Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific. Bye.